Speedrunning. The act of playing a video game, or section of a video game, with the goal of completing it as fast as possible. This style of play has been around almost as long as games themselves. What must have started back in the day as self-imposed challenges for dedicated players, the widespread adoption of the internet in the 90s merged those like-minded individuals into small communities of fierce competitors, comparing notes, sharing breakthroughs, all while trying to one-up each other by achieving the fastest times in their favorite games. Dedicating hundreds or thousands of hours of practice hoping to shave mere seconds off the clock. While the hobby started as niche, mostly being isolated to specific forums or websites, nowadays speedrunning is in the public eye more than ever as gaming has become more and more mainstream, thanks in no small part to the rise of video sharing sites and streaming. Some people have made entire careers based around their ability to rush through beloved classics. There are tons of YouTube channels that cover news and history related to the topic, and events like Games Done Quick have raised millions for charity while shining a spotlight on talented players. I don't think it matters who you are, there's an undeniable fascination in watching someone use all the knowledge they've learned about a game, every path, strategy, and exploit, to blaze through it in ways its developers never could have foreseen. My relationship with speedrunning content is that of a very casual outside observer. I'll watch the occasional run if I want to quickly refresh myself about a particular title, but if I'm being real, my favorite type of videos related to the subject are ones that expose people for cheating or otherwise faking their accomplishment. It's so interesting not only seeing the lengths some players will go to for leaderboard clout, but often more crazy is what exactly gets them caught. Blatant cheaters are one thing, but some of these guys lose their entire legacy because of minor frame discrepancies. It's insane what minute details some people can pick up on. My go-to channel for stuff like this is the man, the myth, the absolute legend Carl Jobst. He makes excellent content documenting major milestones and scandals in all kinds of speedrunning communities. Highly recommend checking him out. But when it comes to actively engaging in the Speedster Olympics, I have little experience. There have been a few times where I've been streaming a game and pulled off some well-known trick just to see if I could do it. As an example, anytime I replay Resi 4, I skip the entire minecart section using the Ditman glitch. It's really cool to break the rules like that. But outside of that kind of stuff, I've always found the prospect of speedrunning to be out of my reach. Good speedrunners don't just memorize routes and execute perfect setups, though they do that too. They know how to improvise, thinking on their feet to turn around potential run-ending mistakes. That kind of skill and instinct requires so much time, so much dedication, that the idea of trying it firsthand is pretty intimidating. But for the sake of science, what if I tried speedrunning a game I've already played hundreds of times? A game I confidently feel I know every inch of. How hard could it be to learn its routes and tricks? And could I get competent at it in a set period of time, say, a week? Let's find out. Hey, another excuse to talk about Splinter Cell Chaos Theory again. I've brought up this stealth masterpiece multiple times on this channel. My love for it has been over-documented. You really, really should play it yourself if you haven't yet. They just don't make games like this anymore. I've spent an absurd number of hours replaying each of Chaos Theory's missions in the same pre-planned way again and again. And while I never get tired of it, maybe it's time I shook things up. My familiarity with this personal favorite sort of makes it the perfect candidate to try out speedrunning on, but that's not the only reason I chose it. I did do a little research. While other games require these insane frame-perfect inputs and map-breaking exploits, sprinting through Sam Fisher's Best seems pretty straightforward. More about taking the right path and hitting your marks, so in theory, it's easier to jump into. I've chosen to try out an any percent run on the normal difficulty, meaning my one and only goal is reaching the end of the game. I'm not trying to complete every obscure objective or beat the entire thing without being seen. I'd lose my mind trying to do that on a time crunch. My strategy for this experiment boiled down to watching the current any percent world record for Chaos Theory, as verified by leaderboardspeedrun.com, and trying my best to replicate what I saw. For me, an average playthrough of the third Splinter Cell is around 4 to 5 hours, though during that time I am trying my best to achieve as close to full completion as I can. The current any percent world record is 44 minutes 55 seconds. So, a tad bit quicker. That world record I'm using as my blueprint was performed by runner Distro, by all accounts the leading authority on Splinter Cell speedrunning. In fact, he currently holds world records for the first 5 entries in the series, the original trilogy and both versions of Double Agent. Watching him so casually plow through these games is a trip. It's mind-blowing to see someone spit in the face of stealth so blatantly for the sake of speed. His Chaos Theory run is linked in the description if you want to see what I'm talking about for yourself. Now, of course, I'm not expecting to become the best speedrunner of all time in only a week. The mere idea of getting anywhere close to that first-place record is silly, and thinking that I could would not only come off as arrogant, but I think disrespectful. Top times like these are achieved after months or years of prolonged practice with countless attempts, and strolling on in with my chest out, confident I could do better, would only make me look like a gigantic ass. I'm just gonna try my best and see where I end up at the finish line. And naturally, I decided to stream my entire journey over on Twitch, both for transparency's sake and because, hey, it's content. So after throwing together a special stream layout and setting up the program LiveSplit, the go-to timer for most runners, I begin my week of speedrunning Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. The first order of business when jumping into this particular challenge is to know the rules. In speedrunning, each game and every category will have a set of guidelines that must be followed for a run to be considered legitimate. When does the run start and stop? Are glitches allowed? Is pausing restricted? Things like that, and thankfully, the rules for Chaos Theory any percent are simple. The run officially starts on the first frame after the Lighthouse's loading screen, and ends on the first frame of the Mission Complete screen after the charge detonates at the end of Kokubo Sosho. Quick saving and loading are allowed, so if something goes wrong, you can correct the mistake. Of course, that will cost time, but at least a single screw-up doesn't have to kill a run, which I'm pretty sure wasn't always the case. Like most of my video ideas, I've sat on this one for well over a year, and I'm almost positive that back when I first looked into all this stuff, quick saving and loading were strictly prohibited, so death would force a full restart. But it seems like things were changed to be more forgiving, which is okay by me. Plus, this ability is very useful for certain parts of the run, but I'll explain why later. Perhaps the most important rule regards how the final time is calculated. You'd think you just play the game, stop the clock, and submit whatever time you get, but it turns out there are bits you have to subtract, specifically any time the game loads. Obviously the screens between levels, but also those brief seconds whenever you choose to save or load manually. All of that can, and in fact must, be removed from the time. This might seem arbitrary, it did to me when I first read it, but this is done to even the playing field by removing any advantage that comes with having a better PC, the platform I'm playing on. These omissions can be done after the fact by counting the seconds and doing math, which sounds so fun, or using a load remover within LiveSplit that automatically pauses the clock at appropriate moments. Unfortunately, I couldn't get this convenience to work at first, so I just timed myself normally, and for the sake of simplicity and easy comparison, I'll stick with those times until my last day of runs. My first day acted as a baseline, playing the game without any practice to see how well I could do. Beforehand, I rewatched Distro's world record run a good dozen times at varying speeds, doing my best to memorize his routes. I streamed for around 5.5 hours, trying to run the game from start to finish, though of the 8 total attempts I did, I only reached the end on 3 of them. Funny thing about speedrunning, when you know what you're supposed to do, and know that you have the capability to do it, it's really easy to fall into a perfectionist mindset. There were runs I restarted within the first couple seconds just because I fumbled selecting inventory items, and others where I screwed up enough times to lose all confidence in continuing. I even soft-locked myself at the end of Bathhouse by saving at the worst possible moment. I can't do anything, I'm stuck. I lose. I have absolutely soft-locked myself. Repeating the same series of actions over and over might seem easy. The more you do something, the better you get at it, right? Sometimes, sure, it can even feel like you're on autopilot, but it's just as common you'll start making dumb little mistakes, whether due to overconfidence or fatigue. And with the pressure of a timer always ticking by, those small blunders started to get to me. Speaking of getting to me, as much as I enjoy the dialogue in Chaos Theory, hearing the same lines back to back to back can easily drive someone mad, especially anything said in Lighthouse since, as the opening level, it's the most replayed. To maintain my sanity, I eventually opted to turn the audio down, enough so that I could still hear it, but could more easily tune it out. While on the subject, there are sections where sitting through said dialogue would needlessly waste time, and that's where the allowance to quick save and load becomes vital. If you save while a character is speaking and then reload, that line is skipped. Doing this in succession lets you breeze through entire conversations in a fraction of the time they'd normally take. A necessary act in some levels where progression is halted until dialogue fully plays out, so anytime you see me spamming those two inputs, you now know why. One other thing I noted during my runs is that most of the levels in Chaos Theory are shorter than I realized. Granted, they weren't designed to be ran through with alarms blaring, but you'd be surprised how quickly some of them fly by, at least in the first half. It's also kind of funny to learn that the missions most players have trouble quietly sneaking through are the same ones that speedrunners dread, namely Seoul and Bathhouse. I'll explain why later, but it's nice to have some common ground. So how well did I perform on my first day of speedrunning? Not too bad, I'd say. My first successful run ended with a final time of 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 44 seconds, though that time was unfortunately inflated since I had to stop at points to deal with chat spam. My second successful run was 1 hour, 1 minute, 41 seconds, a big improvement, even though I made a ton of mistakes throughout my play. I was really hoping to achieve sub 1 hour on my first day. It would have been a nice milestone to hit. I was definitely on pace to do it during my last completed playthrough, but unfortunately glory was snatched from me when Sam refused to get his nicely toned butt cheeks into this final hole, resulting in me having a final baseline runtime of 1 hour, 5 seconds. Still pretty decent for a newbie, I'd say, but I know I can do better. The next 5 days on this journey of mine were focused on individual level practice, optimizing my path through each as best I could. Chaos Theory has 10 total missions to conquer, so I split them into pairs that I would focus on each day, meaning Day 2 had me exclusively replaying Lighthouse and Cargo Ship, Day 3 was Bank and Penthouse, etc., etc. I feel like documenting the days themselves would ultimately be redundant, so instead I'll give brief overviews describing what it's like to speedrun each level, though I will be assuming most people watching already have a general idea of how the game is laid out. As the opening mission, Lighthouse is relatively quick and easy. You go through the starting caves as efficiently as you can, making your way to where Morgenholt is being tortured. This is the only part that really requires pinpoint execution. If you whistle within earshot of these guards, their dialogue ends prematurely, triggering the technician in the back of the room to leave early. You then have to quickly dispatch the 2 guards in your way and run after him, hopefully timing it so you catch up just as he opens this door, saving you from having to lockpick it yourself. It doesn't matter if those 2 guards put some rounds in you during the process, though taking too much damage here will almost certainly mean your death later, since you're guaranteed to be seen when jumping up to this ledge. In this room, you have to interact with a laptop, and turns out there's actually a way to optimize how you do that. Checking a computer for an objective is something the game frequently asks of you, but you don't really need to do anything on the computer for an objective to count, you just have to touch it for a moment. Anytime you do this, Sam has a brief animation where he uses the keyboard and brings down his goggles. However, if you already have your goggles down, this part of the animation is skipped, saving a fraction of time, which adds up during a full run. Weird little thing you'd never think to do, right? But anytime I forgot this little quirk, it felt like an eternity was being wasted. All told, this level takes about 2.5 minutes to finish, though a few hours of practice saw my best run at 2 minutes, 25 seconds. Cargo ship is next, and right off the bat, there's something interesting. Just as you load in, these two shipmates begin chatting, and not far past them is a guard snoozing in a chair. Now, of course, if you try to run by Sleepyhead here, he'll wake up and shoot you in the back, so it's in your best interest to take him out before that. But what if he never existed at all? If you are inhumanly fast and manage to take out these two before they get into their preset position, Chair Guy does not spawn. You need to be so quick that it's kind of a crapshoot to pull off, but I never would have known that was even possible. When you eventually get to the engine room, there's two guards at its entrance that need to be dealt with, and not doing so fast enough will fail the mission. The engine room is established to have a gas leak. If any guns are fired in here, the boat blows up and you get game over. So both guards need to be dropped back to back. Right after this, you need to remotely scan this desktop while on the run, then hippity-hop behind the ship's captain to find out Lacerda's location, who you then dispatch with a quick airfoil shot. Though your objective is to kill Lacerda, the game counts him as dead even if he's just knocked out. I actually improved my times for this level a lot during my practice sessions, with my best run usually taking about 4 minutes. Bank is a mission I'm used to fully ghosting through whenever I play it, so it's immediately weird to start by kicking in the front door. From there, it's a sprint to the laser tripwires on the second floor, and they can be run through without a care. However, while you can run full speed past the first guard you encounter up here, you have to slow down to a brisk walk to avoid getting the attention of the second. Side note that is unrelated to this particular speedrun. Did you know you can actually hopscotch through these wires? It's actually really easy to do on the first set. There's a good chance you'll pull it off on your initial try simply mashing jump. The second set has less space between each laser, so it's much harder to do, but if you know the right path and time it well, you can also frolic right through them. Try it out for yourself sometime, it's super satisfying to pull off. Back on track, all we need to do is hit the 3 required switches that open the bank's vault. So shoot the glass of the security office for quick access, shock this guy as he stands up, and then fire off a few shots at the wall behind him before hitting the last switch. Those shots get the attention of the guard in the next room, who bashes open the door for us, whom we thank for his good deed with a palm to the face. Hit the second switch, shatter Sam's knees by leaping out this window, and head to the treasurer's office where the third and final switch is activated, allowing us to grab whatever we need out of the vault and scramble to the exit. My best time for this not-so-subtle heist clocked in at 3 minutes, 52 seconds. The opening part of Penthouse is relatively straightforward. Just run past all the National Guardsmen until you get to the titular apartment. The first guy you encounter on the balcony has to be run up to and stabbed. However, there's a brief moment before the fatal blow where he will see you, and as far as I can tell, it's a coin flip whether his friends in the next hall will hear him yell. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I'm sure there's some kind of method to the madness. Maybe it's the angle of your attack, but for me, it seemed kinda random, and many of my practice attempts ended right here. Once you're upstairs, shoot these 2 glass panels, cause doors are overrated, quickly shock these 2 guys before they have the chance to see you, and head up to the panic room. Once the building next door is accessible, toss a flashbang to blind this roof patrol, giving you an opening to interrogate him. Grab the output stack from Dvorak as usual, and book it to the elevator. I actually had a good deal of trouble doing this level consistently, but when I did perform it well, I managed to finish in 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Another level that I'm used to ghosting. Displace is the first mission that requires you to have the stealth loadout to optimally run. Partly because you can't kill anyone, but mostly because it comes with gas grenades used to deal with the first groups of mercenaries we come across. Displace is also one of only 2 levels to require hacking. Now, normally, hacking in Chaos Theory has you carefully deciphering a number sequence within a time limit, but in speedrunning, hacking is far less subtle. Yep, you just brute force it until the RNG gods make the default option the correct one. This must be done on the briefcase in the conference room and on this retinal scanner, and as weird as this may sound, you want the hacks on both of these to fail at least once. Why? Because failure triggers an alarm, and you need to have 3 alarms before reaching the server room. Normally when you get in here, the room is in lockdown, and will only open after you've completed your objective and sat through all the follow-up dialogue. However, if you trigger a 4th alarm while in here by letting the guards in the next room see you through the glass, all the doors open early, saving time. You must then deal with said guards on your way out, and potentially a 3rd in the hallway. This 3rd guy's position isn't consistent. Sometimes he'll be right outside the door, sometimes he'll be down the hall. On rare occasions, he just won't show up at all. He can be a pain. I'm happy I waited. I didn't kill anyone! Excuse me? I killed no one! I shocked him! What? When all is said and done, I was able to get through Displace in 3 minutes, 32 seconds. Hokkaido is one of the simplest missions to get through. I'd say it's even more straightforward than Lighthouse. You only take out 3 guys in the entire thing, all of them with quick shock rounds, and there isn't any weird pathing to worry about. You just dart from room to room, brushing shoulders with henchmen. Surprisingly, you don't even have to stop to take out your primary target, Nettage. He's typically found in a side room talking to his cronies, and usually you'd sneak past them and execute your 5th freedom. But unbeknownst to me, if you ignore Nettage, he'll reappear in the courtyard at the end of the level, and since said courtyard is on your route anyway, it's best to save him until the end. The only real risky part in all this is here, where you have to shoot out a window to streamline your path. The guard up here is likely to see you and open fire, but he tends to have stormtrooper aim and usually isn't an issue. Since it's pretty easy going, Hokkaido kinda acts as a good de-stressor on full runs, especially given what a pain some of the upcoming levels can be. 2:37 was my best time. Before I jump into Sam's not-so-subtle battery infiltration, you might notice something different about the on-screen timer. By this point, the Shadow Sprint Master himself, Distro, became aware that someone else on the planet was actually trying to run Chaos Theory, and occasionally popped into my chat to offer advice. When I mentioned my plan to manually subtract loads from the final time since LiveSplit's built-in solution didn't work, he was kind enough to send me a custom remover script that automatically paused the timer when appropriate. As such, I added a second clock to the layout. The top one still tracks real time as before, which for now I'll continue to refer to, but the bottom one tracks my time minus loads and is what I'll officially use for my final submission at the end of all this. Anyway, on to Battery, and this is when things get serious. Battery isn't the most difficult level to complete, but it is the longest up to this point, taking a couple extra minutes to get through. That doesn't sound like much time, but that means there's more to do and more potential mistakes to make. It was crazy to learn that this room of sleeping soldiers, a room I've always thought to tiptoe through because duh, can be traversed with a brisk walk. Thank God for heavy sleepers. At some point, you'll make it to this elevator, where another neat trick can be implemented. Typically, the door on this thing takes a while to fully open and close, burning valuable seconds. But if you walk into it at just the right points, you can get it to close much faster. This technique, known bluntly as fast elevator, isn't too hard to consistently pull off in practice, though when combined with the pressure of a full run, missing it is quite disheartening. Once you reach the top floor, you'll shotgun these 4 gentlemen before heading into the control room to do the required objective. From here, you'll head back down and book it to the first missile platform, shocking the 2 guys who are working underneath it. You then head to the second platform, get the missile abort codes, and wrap up the level. I managed to do all of this in 6 minutes, 23 seconds. It's fitting that the next mission is called Seoul, because that's exactly what this level sucks out of you. Seoul is where even the most promising runs go to die. There is so much that can go wrong, so many ways to lose time. Successfully sneaking through this active war zone is usually a major pain in the ass, but that's nothing compared to dashing past it, and honestly, this is when all this speedrunning stuff stopped being fun. The first part of Seoul isn't too bad. The trickiest part is knocking out the guards outside the server room with a well-placed sticky cam. It's surprisingly easy to screw up the placement, resulting in only 1 guy getting knocked out. Absolutely a place you'll want to save. Seoul's second half is where it gets rough, though it does allow for 1 cathartic moment early on. After making a leap across this gap, you'll need to chuck 2 grenades to eliminate the opposition that's in your path. It's really painless to nail these throws, and immensely satisfying to watch the bad men go boom. But from here on out, trouble awaits. Shortly after this, there's another gap you have to clear, but this one hurts, and is potentially fatal depending on your health. There's a very specific spot you can land to prevent any damage, but it's really hard to hit with any regularity. Then there's a multi-story drop through these bombed-out floors. By aiming your weapon and maneuvering in just the right spot, you can do an exploit to fall the whole way down without a scratch. But if you're not on point even a little, you'll shatter your legs anyway, or land directly in front of 2 trigger-happy soldiers, so placement is key. Past here, you'll come across a firefight. While remaining mindful of the proximity mine in this alley, a well-placed grenade can wipe out the squad that's in your way, but that's only if none of them decide to randomly change position. You'll then have to take down the opposing forces that wait around the corner and run past the minigun-equipped tank without it killing you. Once you finally make it all the way to the downed plane, you have to hope beyond hope that you time it right so this second tank doesn't put you down as you make your way to this set of ladders. Once you've done that, throw a bunch of smoke grenades for cover and spam through the end mission dialogue. Seoul is exhausting to run, and I do not look forward to revisiting it on the final day. 644. Another infamous level in the Chaos Theory pantheon, and another that requires equipping the stealth loadout, Bathhouse has the same problem whether you're a sneaky boy or a speedy one, which is of course its final act. There's not much to say about the route leading up to that. As long as you're consistent and hitting your shots, it's more or less smooth sailing. Though it was in this level I learned an easy way to ensure Sam always falls through tight spaces, like this one at the start. Optimally, Sam would just drop down this opening when you run over it, but it's common for him to float above it or magnetize to one of the surrounding ledges. However, if you walk over it with a weapon drawn, he'll drop right in. No fuss, should come in handy. Anyone who's played Bathhouse knows what a pain the last part of it is, and it's as rough as it always was. After skipping through Shetland's meeting dialogue as fast as you can, a huge firefight breaks out, and much like Seoul, it's a bitch to get past. A well-placed flashbang gets you by the first encounter happening in the hall, and another is used to get through this nightmare trio in the next room, although no matter how well you think you threw it, you'll want to recite a prayer or 2. The flash could miss one of the guards, they could end up standing in your way, or you'll be so elated you actually managed to get by these assholes that you'll totally forget about the wall mine that's around the corner. After that is defusing bombs in the furnace room. There's no advantage to skipping Shetland's dialogue here, as the defusing animation takes the same amount of time regardless. The issue here are the guards that wander in each time you finish a bomb. The first one is dealt with easily enough, but if the others end up seeing you, you can more or less kiss the run goodbye. Whether they do or not probably isn't entirely luck-based, but it sure feels like it is. If you somehow manage to make it out of the room, you encounter Shetland on the roof and watch this climactic encounter play out as normal. There's no way to skip this scene. It takes almost 2 minutes to play out, though in the name of speed, it always ends in sudden, hilarious fashion.
I know you. You believe in these things more than any government. And I know that because of it, you wouldn't shoot an old friend.
Yeah, blah blah blah. We gotta move this along, Shetland. Thanks to the padding caused by this standoff, Bathhouse takes the longest amount of time to complete, with my personal best being 8 minutes, 52 seconds. We are at the home stretch now. Kokubo Sosho, which I'm hopefully pronouncing right, is the final level we have to get through, and thankfully, it's a relative walk in the park compared to the two that preceded it. Make sure to bring the stealth load out for this one as well, handy since killing is restricted until the finale. There are two main things to keep in mind as you run through Kokubo. First, some guards in this level are equipped with non-lethal rounds, and can incapacitate Sam the moment they spot him. This leads to a cool sequence where Sam is interrogated, but that would waste tons of time, so you need to avoid being directly seen while dispatching anyone in your path. The second thing you'll want to do is make sure you have 4 alarms before you get to the vent leading into the war room. Having 4 alarms shortens all dialogue significantly, allowing for conversations to be skipped more quickly. There are cameras along your path you'll want to be spotted by, and a retinal scanner to hack, which should get you to max alarms just before the war room. Once you're through all that, take the elevator down to the bottom floor. This ride is long and can't be bypassed, but it does give you a minute to relax and prepare for what's ahead. When the elevator stops, you'll drop down the shaft as usual, shoot a wall mine to wipe out any resistance in your path, and quickly but carefully make your way through this hall, avoiding all the tripwires. Once you're in the command center, you'll need to use your pistol's OCP to freeze the gun turret overlooking the room, shock the 2 guards that are in your path, and blow up the servers as instructed. Once that's destroyed, a few more baddies will enter the room, but a couple quick flashbangs makes them easy to get past. You'll likely blind yourself too, but as long as you know the route, you should be able to reach Atomo without issue. Strategically skip the dialogue that plays out between Sam and our villain, stabilize him after he commits Sudoku, and plant the bomb on the window. Once the closing cutscene is skipped, we've officially reached the end of the Chaos Theory run. Like I said, Kokubo Sosho isn't too bad on its own, but there is an added stress to playing it simply due to the fact that it's the end. My best time for Kokubo was 7 minutes, 53 seconds. With a week's worth of Chaos Theory practice behind me, the last day arrived. This is when everything mattered. Whatever meager skills I had built up had to come together so I could spend as little time as possible beating one of my favorite games. Adding up all the best runs I achieved for the individual levels gave me a theoretical best completion time of 50 minutes, 55 seconds. Remember, though, that's the unofficial estimate since it doesn't remove seconds spent loading, again indicated by the bottom timer, which is what I'll now be referring to. With that in mind, my PB is probably something closer to the low end of 49 minutes. But that's if I played every level to the best of my ability back to back with minimal screw-ups, which I didn't think was very likely to happen. There's a world of difference between replaying a singular level and having to get through the entire game from start to finish. It really adds to the pressure. I went in feeling optimistic. I thought all that training would give me a sense of confidence that would make the speedrun process easier. But it sort of ended up doing the opposite. Recall on the first day that perfectionist mindset I said you can fall into. Yeah, I ended up falling into it hard. I found myself resetting tons of runs in their early stages because of small screw-ups since I knew it wasn't the best I could do. This is a terrible attitude to have, honestly. I would have been much less stressed out if I simply rolled with the punches and barreled onward. But once I was inside my own head, I never managed to crawl out of it. Plus, I was streaming, which added a desire to perform well. Sure, my viewers were encouraging, cheering me on, and I tried to coax myself out of my ever-declining mood, but once I'm feeling crappy, I tend to stay there for a while. Since I was constantly judging my performance so harshly, progress was slow. As I made mistakes, I became annoyed, which put me in a worse mood, which of course snowballed into more mistakes. It was a vicious cycle. Didn't help that the constant resetting meant I was spending 80% of my stream on Lighthouse hearing the same third echelon banter ad nauseum. And I managed to softlock myself on Bathhouse in the same exact way I had on day 1. Because I kept canceling my playthroughs, I didn't manage to finish a run until almost 3 hours of play, where I ended up with an official runtime of 52:32. Respectable, I thought. But the run in question had plenty that could be corrected. I knew I could do better. I knew I was capable of it, so I kept going, even though that may not have been the best idea. My attitude continued to be less than ideal, especially now that I had a concrete time to beat, which made mistakes matter even more. Add to that the fatigue of long-term repetition, and man, I was struggling. But finally, after almost 6 hours of play, on January 15th, 2023, I achieved this run. It sounds so much cooler when Carl says it. Come on! Come on! I'm so happy! It only took 6 hours! It almost drove me mad, but I finally got a legit run I was happy with. It certainly wasn't a perfect playthrough. There are many obvious blunders throughout it, but by this point, I didn't care. I had not only beaten Chaos Theory in less than an hour, but I managed to do it twice, achieving a personal best time of 51:25. And while it was a rough battle to get there, there's nothing quite like the feeling of accomplishment that hit when I finally did. Could I potentially do even better with more time and practice? Almost certainly, but for now, I'm content to keep my sanity and wear my 51:25 with pride. If you'd like to watch the full run for yourself, you can find it linked in the description. Fair warning, though, you can absolutely tell that I'm not in the best mindset during it. I stay silent for long periods and get overly annoyed at minor things. It's not my best look, but if you know the previous defined context, I hope you can excuse the somewhat sour attitude. So, to answer the question that ultimately began this whole excursion, yes, you can absolutely learn to speedrun a game you're already familiar with in only a week. Keep your expectations in check, don't go thinking you'll be topping the leaderboards anytime soon, and you might find a new fun hobby to enjoy. Something I admittedly lost sight of. Whether it's against yourself or other players, speedrunning is inherently competitive. But if you end up focusing too much on that aspect of it, like I did, you'll just end up causing yourself a bunch of unneeded frustration and stress. Speedrunning's main purpose from its inception to now is to be a fun challenge, fun being the operative word there. And while there's nothing wrong with taking that challenge seriously, if you find yourself getting overly upset by the process, it's best to take a step back. Trust me. Because of how my personality is, I don't think speedrunning will ever be a long-term thing for me. I'm perfectly content to continue being a passive observer and let the masters do what they do. However, that didn't stop me from submitting my best any percent time to the Chaos Theory leaderboard over on speedrun.com. Though even several weeks later, as I put the finishing touches on this video, my submission has yet to be verified. and I think that's because there's no one around to check. Well, thanks to my constant procrastination, there has been an update. While my run sat in limbo for just over a month, in the last few days it was finally approved and added to the leaderboards by none other than Distro himself, who recently took charge as a moderator for several of Mr. Fisher's games. He also cleaned up the Chaos Theory leaderboard by separating different systems into their own lists and added 2 new categories, one that allows for quick saves and loads, and one that doesn't. High fives all around, it's definitely a much nicer looking page now, though as I'm about to get into, it's still pretty barren. When I first jumped into all this, I was a bit sad to discover that the speedrun community for Splinter Cell as a series is tiny and largely inactive. While other popular franchises have games with countless submissions across every possible category, Splinter Cell has very few names on its leaderboards, with the original and Conviction tying for most at 18 each. For context, if you add up every run in every category for every entry in the franchise, that total would be dwarfed by meme games. Mr. Krabs overdoses on ketamine, which, yes, is a real thing, has a significantly more active scene. Maybe it's because speedrunning seems to fly in the face of the stealth genre? But for a series as beloved as this one, it's a bit disheartening to see that few runners seem to have any interest in blazing through it. And there's a part of me that hopes this video changes that. I'm not expecting 10,000 people to suddenly start submitting runs, but it'd be cool to see the community get a small shot in the arm. A handful of newcomers interested in testing their skills in a way they haven't before. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.